All right. Thanks for being here. Christopher
Thank you.
Robert K., podcaster, singer, musician. Perhaps to start, what do you see as the creative connection between music performance and podcasting?
Well, definitely my podcast, Unstage Music Podcast. I have artists on there all the time, and I discuss between how did the pandemic affect you? What about AI? Would you ever use that in your creation? Um, I just simply ask them, like, who are you basically? Why did you choose music? And some of them, their answers are like, wow, you found the guitar in the garbage, you picked it up, and that's what you did, you know? So everything's a link. Doesn't matter what you do, you know.
When you started doing your podcast, how did you pick the format for it? Has it changed over time or is it like it started?
Well, I like the fact that you get the two windows, and I like the fact that you can have different overlays. And I did my first 30 podcasts as live streams, and a lot of them are like people are watching live stream. You got a lot of mistakes on it, so I said after 30 live streams, I'll just do everything pre-pod, like pre-record, and then I could just put the clips and videos and then there after, and then upload it for perfection. So
So the
basically.
clips are things like musical performances.
Musical performances when I have celebrities on or actors, actresses, I kind of get their acting reel. Um, Sometimes I might get a performer who's an actor, so actor, podcaster, um, radio host, stuff like that, and I have to listen. This is what they do. It's amazing. They're not just musicians; they have other things that they're doing as well.
How much time do you put into like post recording or to like post processing on a podcast? It's a lot of P's.
Yes. So the last one I did was the longest one I did was 5 hours, and I had to edit it down to 3 hours. And then the shortest one I did was 40 minutes, and then that still had mistakes. So I take a day throughout the week, and I say Tuesday, this is the day I'm going to be editing the podcast. It takes either an hour, 2 hours. I put a lot of work into it. Um, Save it as 1080p, save it as 4K, um, and post it. Sometimes the internet is good, takes an hour. Sometimes last one, my God, it took 9 hours to upload to YouTube.
Good gracious. What kind of equipment do you use for doing the recording and like your audio and sound equipment? What kind of stuff do you use for the podcast?
Yes, so I use a laptop. I use two mics because I'm doing an in-person interview on Wednesday, so I have to bring everything with me. I have three laptops, and as of January, I'm going to be getting lar larger equipment, studios. So I'm almost at 300 episodes. So I want to get better and better as I go. And I talk to other podcasters. How do you answer this question? Should I say this question or should I say it differently? I want to be like, this is going to be funny, TR, but I want to be like Dan Rather. Have you ever seen his form of interviewing?
I have.
Oh my God, I want to be like that.
Hmm. So then with your, how's it different for you from doing the online, like this type of conversation versus the in-person when you're doing your podcast?
Yeah, so the in-person is sort of like I'm there with you in your office, and there's only one frame of video, and you don't have to worry about anybody else, and it's just one shot. I have laptop here, I have the iPhone here. Last time I had two iPhones, and I just edit it like that, and it looks pretty good. You get to meet the person, their physical, um, and I don't have to bring like more than one laptop and just have it facing them and me. And then I have an iPhone facing close up on their face, another phone close up on their face, and I edit it. And it looks like one of these like professional interviews. But it's very rare because I'd rather do an interview like this because I can do it in the comfort of my studio here. And they may be like in Australia, for instance. And
Yeah, I find it's more practical, at least starting out until you
yeah,
get like the $1 million contracts with Spotify. That you can't bring all your guests out to you. I think a conversation in person is better, but this isn't bad. You just miss out on the bigger picture, if you will. It's a little more condensed down to what you're seeing and the feedback you're getting from the other person. But yeah,
Yeah,
done any in person yet. I mean, I've
exactly.
people in the real world in person, but just not an interview like this.
I know exactly what you're talking about, TR. So I watch Diary of a CEO, and I see how Stephen Bartlett does this. Everyone, all the guests walk in first, they sit down, and then he'll have his stuff in his hand, and he'll look at the guest, and he'll sit down, and they'll go like this, say, and then he'll ask the first question, and they're like, like this, or this Joe Rogan, or oh, Rich Roll. So many of them I get inspiration from. Check out my friend when you get a chance. Harvey Brownstone interviews. He interviews celebrities. They reach out to him, and like this crazy. I just want to be better. I don't want to be like stagnant. I'm in my third year. I plan to have Sting on my podcast. I want to do really good interviews, and I just want to grow from there.
Have you ever gone through a time in your podcasting where you thought, what am I doing this for? Or what am I doing?
Sorry about that. Um, yes, it's sort of like I've known people say, "Oh yeah, my brother is friends with Geddy Lee or something like that." Or one guy said, "Yeah, and I played in the Bruce Springsteen's E band, or I played with Bon Jovi." I said, "Oh, can I get Bon Jovi and Pop?" He's, "Nope, not going to happen." So now, when I hear that, I said, "Oh, you're friends with Geddy Lee, cool." So anyway, the next question I ask, because you're not going to say, "Hey, maybe I'll get Geddy Lee on your podcast." It doesn't work like that. But then it's like, what am I doing all this for? These are just independent artists, and I mean, they're people and they're worth a lot. And then I realized, you know what? I'm enjoying doing it. It's helping me get out of my shell, be more confident with people, and it has helped me with the seminar the other day, where I was interviewed by panel, and the interview, um, and I just went out to say, listen, I'm going to be responding like I was in the podcast. I said on stage, all that one. Remember, you want to be subscribed, please. So it helps me get out of my shell because I was generally, what do you call it, unconfident person, and now it's like, hey, you know. So, but just recently, I was like, what am I doing this podcast for? Like, they're on my podcast, and then they don't even communicate with me after that. They just drop me for some reason. Or or some don't show up. I'm sitting there for 30 minutes and say you haven't shown up. And then 2 weeks later, no response. And I said, hi, we're supposed to have a podcast 2 weeks ago. Oh yeah, I was in the hospital. Oh, okay, no problem. Like, can you spend 2 minutes saying, oh, I'm in the hospital, so I can't make it. And that really pisses me off. I don't know if you've had something like that, but
Yeah, you get the no call, no shows. How do you schedule your guest, like the first contact with them? How do you get the guests to know about the show? I guess that's a weird way to
yeah.
say it.
So do you want to know the three types? So the first one is okay, I want to invite a violinist, a soprano, tenor on my podcast. So I'll do I'll go to operabase.com or somewhere, and I'll just check to see, violinist. Oh, wow, she's good, or she's got a great voice, whatever. And then I'll go to the website, and I go to menu, I go to contact information, I look. If there's like the contact thing, says put your name and everything, what's the reason for the message? Oh, my name is Chris. I have a podcast called On Stage Podcast. Could you if I don't find any of that, I go to Facebook, I go to About Info, I click on About Info, and if there's an email right there, boom, I got them. And then I send the email. Um, and then they just wait like 2, 3 months to get, oh, I'm sorry, but your email I found it in the junk mail. That's fine. But if you just say, oh, yeah, sorry, I'm just getting your email now, I've been busy, that's fine. But not responding to me, saying, no, I can't do the interview, or I don't do interviews. Just, it's been about a year and a half and 30 emails have gone unanswered. Like, what do you do about that?
I usually send out the initial first email And then if I don't get a response, then I just have a spreadsheet of people that have been on, like I've asked to be on or have asked to be on. And then I keep track of it that way. So I have a spreadsheet, and then I highlight it in red if there was no response or if they said no. And I'll put it in notes of they said no or no call, no show. That's one you get a red too. And then I had one that said, let me know after you get to your 300th podcast. And this is back when I was still in, double digits.
Really?
And I said, so then I just put them under the, I'll never ask them again, so they have the red line through it. And then when I finish the podcast and it's recorded, I'll put it on there and it'll have the green. And if I have a letter out to them and I haven't heard yet, then it's in yellow. And eventually, if they say no or they're scheduled, it changes. But if I don't hear anything in like a couple weeks, I might send out a second email, but usually it's just one. And then I'll just put it in red. So then I know not to spend time sending them emails in the future if I'm looking at my spreadsheet and I forget that I've sent them a request before. But my success rate is about 50% of emails I send out to emails I get responded to. So
that's interesting. Yeah, I was told to come up with an email list. I should do that and do exactly what you did because to tell you the truth, I can't remember who said no, who didn't respond. But they said it's good to have an email list in case something happens and you lose your YouTube channel or something. Then you have all these people who say, listen, this happened, and you have like, I don't know if you ever had this issue where you had someone on your podcast and they said, oh, by the way, I love what you're doing, TR. I love the podcast. I know somebody who might be you like to, and then they mentioned something. You're like, you know this person? Wow. You ever had that as well?
of getting a guest through another guest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every now and then you have those, and they'll say, I know another person, and it works out. And then I've also had I know another person, and then I'll send them an email and I never hear anything back. That's okay. I mean, people are busy. I wouldn't look at it as a sign of absolute rejection if you send one email and they don't respond, because people have things going on. So I don't want to bother them with much more than 2 emails. Usually it's just one. If they say something like, yeah, I'm interested, then I'll send another email saying, well, here's the stuff, the information about it, how it works. And if I don't hear anything back from them again, I might do one more and say, are you still interested? And then if I don't hear anything, it's just highlighted in red and I go on to the next one.
Yeah.
I used to plan it out to have 3 shows released a week on every Wednesday. And that became more like a job. Like if you're getting paid to do a podcast or you don't have anything else going on, then, or you have some help, then I could probably do recording maybe 5 a week max, but 2 is okay. And then I try to do 2 and then have a week or so off and do another 2 like that now, because I'm only doing 1 a week. But when I was doing 3, I would schedule the person for whatever episode number it is. And then they would get all shuffled around, and I'd be recording like episode 100 before episode 95. And now if the 95 doesn't show up, now I've got to go back and change everything around that I've already uploaded and titled and all that. So now I find it a lot easier that I just do it in the order that they're recorded. And I just say, okay, so this one is 129. This is the 129th recording. I have one tomorrow that's 130. If this one didn't show up, like if we didn't connect today, then tomorrow's would have just been 129. And I didn't have everything set up for it already. I have to change a few things in my notes, but that's about it. And that I find less frustrating for me, easier to do. And you always have the learning curve anyway, because you're trying to figure out what's a good amount to do versus how do you maintain that, consistency of however often you're putting it out. If you're putting one out a day, you got to have one a day. If you're putting one out a month, one out a week, however you're doing it, just try to remain consistent. So that's my biggest stress so far in it. And I've only been doing it a little
Huh.
over a year,
Mhm.
and I haven't missed a week yet, but I'm not sure what I'll do if I do miss a week. I guess, I just miss a week, but I'm trying not to.
So it's 3 on a Wednesday you do?
That's what I've done at the
Oh,
peak. I think I had a couple Wednesdays with 4, and now I'm scheduling it so it's more controllable while I'm doing other things too. And I do release 1 a week.
okay. Well, with me, it's sort of like I still have some August and September's still to upload into July. And if I have a new type of layer and a new beginning, a new ending video, um, subscribe and stuff like that. Uh, but the ones I did previously, what I haven't uploaded yet, have like I don't no longer put the names on there. I do like
Uh,
on the guest, it's like the names there. Then I have to create a whole brand new layer. I have to create a whole brand new thing. I had to cover up that name and then do the best I can because sometimes if I do a podcast, like let's say I did one in June, and so yeah, it'll be out by July, and yet now it's November and it's still not out. It's not my fault. I'm so busy now. I still have 21 to upload, and hopefully I can get all that done by the end of December. I have one Christmas episode. I had to do a very first Halloween episode this year. And I'm re-uploading a Christmas episode I did 2 years ago because I don't have any availability for Christmas episodes. So, but it's fun. Um, hey, TR, did you ever get this email where the person would say, "Yeah, thank you very much for reaching out, but who have you had on your podcast that's of our guest caliber that are better than?" I'm like, "Excuse me, uh, I don't want you on there," because they're like kiss my hand sort of guest, you know?
yeah, I've had a few of those, and usually I just say, well, the podcast is published on Spotify and YouTube now. You can check it out, see what you think. Let me know if you're
Yeah,
interested,
yeah,
and then let's go on from there.
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that if this podcast took off and it gets to, you know, thousands or millions of views a week,
Mhm.
that it would be too much for just me to deal with. So then I wonder how much I would seem like that to other people when they contacted me, and I was like, and I'd be like, well, what would be my criteria for having them on? Because you can't have everybody because there's just not enough time. So you got to choose somehow. But yeah, I think it helps to be upfront with people. Try not to be snotty. But I mean, there's going to be every now and then you'll get somebody that says, mainly I get people that want to like sell a product, whatever it is. And they're like, I'd like to be on the podcast to talk about this thing. And I'd say, it's cool. This is a podcast about creativity mainly. And we talk about other things too, because creativity is a broad topic. But is that something you'd want to have a conversation about, creativity? And if they say, well, I just want to be able to sell whatever this thing is, then I go, well, maybe this isn't the right matchup right now. I have your information because I'm putting it on the spreadsheet because I talked to them, and I'll I'll make a note of it, and if things change, I'll get in touch with you. But for right now, I'm not sure it's a good match. So you got to be nice to people, but
I
or at
know
least cordial.
I get people who um, I love your podcast. I love what you stand for. My name is this is what I do, and I'm looking at it. Okay, there's nothing about music. They're not actors. They're something different. And I'm like, oh, what do I do? Because you don't want to say no. Because you get a response like, oh, I really want to be on your podcast. Oh, then what do you do? Like you can't say no. So that's a
You
difficult
get
decision right
you get a lot of people. I've had people like that before, and I go ahead and record it because just because you record it doesn't mean it has to be published. But I've had a few podcasts like that where I was like, well, I'm not sure they really fit into the topic. But as I said, creativity, pretty broad topic. You can tie that in with most anything. And even if somebody doesn't present as a creative person, you can still talk about creativity with them. I mean, they're going to be creative somehow. But so those have been some pretty good podcasts where you have somebody and you don't expect it to be good and it's a great conversation. So I would say if you have the time, schedule them and talk to them. And then if it's a shorter recording, then it's just shorter and you have a short podcast to put out. And if it's longer and it's 5 hours, that's great. If you got 5 hours worth of stuff, go for it. So I know most of Joe Rogan's are around 3 hours. And I listen to a lot of those, and I'll listen to them in multiple sittings. So it's not like I sit down and listen to it 3 hours straight through, but you do get different information in a conversation into the second and third hour than you would in just the first hour. And certainly if you were just talking to somebody for 15 minutes, you're not going to get into those deep conversations about what's the meaning of life and where do you think creativity comes from. I mean, you can put those in the first 15 minutes, but you're not really going to, if you're not set up to have that conversation, you're not getting into it within the first 15 minutes or maybe the first hour.
That's true.
Different symptoms.
When you're talking about how do I deal with an episode and how long does it take me, there is one I haven't uploaded yet, but I think it was August that I had from the rock group called Ides of March, and a member of Survivor is in this band as well. His name is Scott May, and he was a friend of mine. I didn't know. He said, I know all these people. You can get whoever you want on there. I said, but I talked to Scott and he'd love to be on your podcast. And I would have known otherwise. I'm like, really? So I talked to the guy. I said, do you have time? I'm in my studio. I'm at home. I'm fine. Okay. So we talked for 3 hours. And I said I was going to do, like, I only do like an hour. So I was going to do like an hour and then do a part 2, part 3. And I'm like, you know what? Why am I doing that? So I talked to my friend and he said, well, why don't you just post the whole thing? The only reason I didn't want to post the whole thing is because we talk about music here, then we talk about music here, and we talk about something else here. So it's kind of sporadic. So he said, just post it. It's okay. I'll post all 3 hours. So now I have to go through the whole thing, add all the films, add all the clips, all the music and everything again, and make it a great episode. And I said, okay, I'll post it on my channel on Christmas Day. I mean Christmas Eve, because I do have a Christmas Day episode already. So that's 2 days. So yeah. So apart from that, so Joe Rogan does 3 hours. All you have to do is watch 5 minutes, and that's one view. Or watching multiple sittings. Do that. Who says you have to sit down and watch 3 hours of, So I've learned a lot in three years. Like my first episode was a friend of mine said, hey, I just started a podcast. Since you're a musician and we sing together, can you go on? I said, sure. And I said, oh, there's something with this. So now it's sort of like I want to be better. I want to evolve. I want to be like a 500 episode. I want them to be reaching out to me. Hi, maybe Geddy Lee or whoever. Hey, it's Harrison Ford. I love to be on, But right now it's sort of like I just love what I'm doing now. At some point I'm like, what am I doing this all for? Like they're not showing up. They don't tell me that they're not going to be there, and I'm sitting there for half an hour, and I miss my chance to go to this party, whatever. So I say, you know what? I love it. I still love doing it, even if I sit there, I'm all prepared, excited for such and such to show up, and they don't show up. I'm just going to let it slide, and I may get an email from the next day. So I'm so sorry. But I always check with the time zone because I had that incident where I said to the PR, you told me that they were in EST, but they were in CST, so they're an hour behind. So I was sitting there for an hour waiting for 12 noon, and I find out to them it was 12 noon. We're waiting. Where are you? Oh, you're in CST. I wasn't told that. So time zones have to be correct. And there's 3 time zones in Australia: Sydney, Perth. Perth is 13 hours. Brisbane is like 14 hours. You have to kind of. So if you do like a Monday morning, it's Sunday night. If you do a Sunday morning, it's a Monday. So it's hard. So you got to figure out time zones. So are you sure you're CST? Are you sure CET? Are you sure you're in Germany? 6 hours ahead. Are you sure in UK and Ireland? 6 hours ahead. So okay, this is. So I give them the hour. So 11 a.m. your time. That means I have to be up at 5 a.m. in the morning. My cat gets me up anyway to do the podcast. I say, good morning, it's 5 a.m. They're from Germany. And I always use the stupid joke to say, hey, since you're 6 hours ahead, do you have a lottery number so I know them?
Time
I think
travel.
Just thinking they're tired of that joke. But yeah, so that's it.
That's a solid joke. I'd use it every time. The the trick it's tricky doing the time zones, and I
Yep.
found that I try to do it in the person I'm talking to time zone so they don't have to think about it. I think about it. So I get it straight and I know, am I going to be at 11 p.m. doing this for them at 11 a.m. the next day? And how's it? I worry about all that. And then also to even simplify it more because of daylight savings, and even in the States where sometimes a state's on daylight savings or it's not, or it doesn't do daylight savings, and it starts to get tricky in some of the some central time, but they're all in central standard. They're never on central daylight, and even when it's daylight savings time, they're not on daylight, they're still on standard. So I just say, where are you, what city is the closest city, and then I say, all right, let's do it on Denver time, or we'll do it on Sydney time, instead of saying the time zone or UTC plus whatever, because a lot of people don't understand that. It's fun to do. I like it, but I don't think everybody does. So everybody has their own little thing. So I just say London time on this date, and then I make sure that I get it right. And if anyone messes up, it's me that messed up. If they don't call and they don't show up, that's them, and I deal with it like this. That's why I don't do Calendarly or anything like that. I do
Yeah.
emails, because if you can't respond to emails back and forth, then how can I count on you, a stranger, to show up when you say you're going to show up? And the same for you to me. So I do it by email, and then I'll do the one a week before that just says, "Hey, I'm looking forward to this time recording this. Make sure it's all still good. Let me know if we're still on for it." And then they respond back. Like us scheduling this, it took a few times. Like I think I first had an email with you maybe in March, so it takes a while, and that's okay. It's because we had that communication going. So if you can communicate with the person, that's good. So you get the week before, you send them the email, they say, yeah, we're still on. You go, okay, I'm going to send you the link at whatever 55, 5 minutes before we're going to record. So then I send them the link at 5:50, at whatever, the 5 minutes before we start recording. If
Mm.
they don't show up within 5 minutes, then I'll send an email that says, let me know if you didn't get the link. I'll send it to you again if you're
Oh,
having trouble with it. And
that's
then
it. Hmm.
if they don't respond to that, then 5 minutes from then I'll say, let me know if you're having some problems. I'll be in the virtual studio for 5 more minutes. And then when they don't show up or I don't hear from them for 5 more minutes, now I'm 10 past the hour or whatever the time was to record. Then I'll say, hey, sorry, we couldn't match up on this one. Let me know if you'd like to reschedule in the future. And then I'll wait 5 more minutes after that. I don't tell them I do. I just say, I'll wait 5 more minutes. And then if they still don't show up, then on the spreadsheet, it goes highlighted red, no call, no show. And then that's just it. If I get an email from them in the future, however far in the future, then okay, maybe we reschedule it. And if not, I just don't worry about it. But I have them on that spreadsheet, so I don't ask them again, because I don't want to get to the point where, because you're asking, your spreadsheet's going to be hundreds of lines, and
Huh.
then you're like, well, like if you're on 300 and some episodes, you've probably talked to 600 some people. That's how it worked with me. It's about 50-50, as I said. So you don't want to keep asking the same person, especially if you know they didn't show up.
Yeah. How about like I just found an email that was sent to me in November 2023. And 2 weeks ago, I said, "Yeah, I just got this email. Did you still want to be a podcast?" I said, "Yes, I love to be on the podcast." How about January? Yes, January is great. They're not like, "I sent you an email to be on your podcast. It's been 5 months. Where the hell are you?" And some of them they want to be on the podcast. They won't be like that. They'll be like, "Yes, sure." I, and I'm sitting on some because I haven't written out the January schedule yet. I don't use Calendarly because it doesn't work for me. I don't, and but they also say, "Can you send me a Google calendar?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to say. How do you do that?" I just like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't use Google Calendar, but I will give you the dates and times that I can do this." Oh, okay, do that then. Calendly doesn't work for me. It's garbage. But I wish there was a way I could say, "Listen, these are the times that I can do an EST." And when you send them the link, it's automatically converted to their time zone. But I have to go, okay, what is it? So 5 p.m. and they're in CST, so it's 4 p.m. Or, oh, they're in Germany, so they can only do 11 a.m. Okay, that's another 5 a.m. for me. Okay, so that's fine. But they don't mind that. They're not saying, "Oh, you're so unprofessional. You're writing out everything." So why don't you, like, Calendly doesn't work. Whatever I tried, all these doesn't work. So I just write it out. But your idea for I've been thinking of doing this, an email list. People I've had on my podcast, who they are, their emails, website, and if they, just like different headings. So I have to do that. I don't want to get to episode 400 before I realize, oh shoot, that's gonna take me a while. I'm only at
Yeah.
255 now.
Yeah. Organization is key. I figured that out the first 2 or 3 podcasts when I was still just scheduling people I knew versus strangers. So it's, yeah, organized. I'll give this to you in this thought in a weightlifting motif. When you're lifting weights, if you try to lift 700 pounds and you hurt yourself, you're not going to lift weights for a while. So think about it as far as in a month, how much weight did I lift? So if I lift 10 pounds 20 times a day for a month, that's a lot.
Mhm.
So it's going to add up. So then with podcasting, that's how I approach it is how can I make it little weights to lift, like organize well, don't overextend, try to if I record an episode, I try to get it out as quick as I can. Now when I'm just doing one a week, I find it's easier because usually I try to do it in the same week, but that's too much stress. Sometimes it works out like that. But then what if they don't show up? Who are you going to replace them with? How are you going to schedule that? So just take all that out and just say, look, I'm going to have 2 or 3 shows in the hopper that are ready to go. So I'm good through the end of this month. Like this one will publish the second Wednesday of next month, January 2025. And I find that that takes that stress off of me. So I'm not doing the 700-pound lift, trying to put in videos and record 5-hour shows and post production and all this other stuff when I just say, okay, I'm going to record it. I'm going to put it up as it is. Here we go. It's like live TV, but it's recorded. If you had to pause it in the middle of something, you could. Pretty easy. Like if somebody delivered a package to your door right now, we just pause it, you go, and then boom, we reappear right here. Yeah. And I'm not going back in post production and splicing that out because I think you also take out a certain authenticity of a conversation because you're not going to go back and edit your conversations when you're talking to somebody. It's going to feel different. And when you put it through those different post production audio things that take out the dead air, like if somebody says or and you take all those out, that conversation's not going to sound natural. It's okay if you want to do that. I'm not saying it's wrong. Some people really like the technical side of it. That's great. That's not for me. I'm going to record it. And that's why I use StreamYard. This isn't a StreamYard commercial, but it's so simple to put those things up. I like it better than Zoom for podcasts. Maybe if you're doing a meeting or something, Zoom is okay. But I think I would probably still use StreamYard in a meeting anytime I was doing a video conference with anybody, just because I'm familiar with it. So it's pick one, learn how to use it. And then if you like it, stick with it. That's StreamYard's working pretty well.
Yeah, and ever since they added that pause button, really useful. But sometimes I'm like, let's just let it run. There might be something that happens that's going to be gold that you want to keep in there. Like, for instance, last year I had celebrity actress Jennifer Runyon, who was in like Ghostbusters and all them. And during the podcast, her phone fell. And I said, I'm not cutting that out. And she goes, no, leave it, leave it. So it's in there. Coughs, it's sort of like I could do it where I can edit the cough out so you don't even know that they cough. And if they're doing something like coughing themselves or doing something weird, and like I gotta edit that out, but I don't. It'll kind of funny when you're like this, and by the time you edit, it's like you're like this. You're like doing some sort of poltergeist thing because of the video edits are gone. What I do is I just take a screenshot of them when they're talking like this, and I paste it on top. So it may look like they're frozen for a bit, but it could be, hey, they're just frozen, you know. So I do. I'm ever since I had the podcast, I've learned about video editing, design, scheduling, booking, scripting, everything. And I want to make these podcasts look great. I don't want somebody just in case, you know, hi, I'm the PR of Nicole Kidman, whatever. She'd love to be on your podcast. I'm not going to go, okay, just I'm going to be making sure that, you know, it's pristine, it's working and everything. Because she may say, hey, guess what? I've been on the Onstage podcast. You should too. You know, and then, yeah, let me try that out. I don't want them to say, oh, it's a terrible podcast. You don't believe that they have this, they have that, and that. And sometimes I will leave, like the other day, there's an actress I had and I said to her, you know, my cat's black cat. Don't ever get a black cat because, you know, sometimes she'll ruin everything. And if I could, I'd edit a video of all the times my cat had interrupted my podcast episode. And she goes, oh, I got a black cat too. Really? And while my cat was playing in the background, hers is there too. And I'm like, oh, this is neat. Two black cats. So stuff like that. But you know when to edit and when not to edit. Um, and sometimes the mother or whatever, some manager of whoever, especially if they're like young as well, their mother is their manager, and they come out and say, you hear them in the background, hear them talking or whatever. Um, or I had Bailey Perry, who's the Taylor Swift of Australia. She was in doing the interview in the kitchen, and her brother and her mother and her father walked by, and I said, you know, I'm keeping all that. It's like you said, it's authentic. You're not making anything up. It's just a true conversation. You should see the views are like 1,600 now. But um, if the conversation's good, but you also have to be good. I may not be as good as Dan Rather or anybody else, but or Joe Rogan. Um, I want to be in a way where I can give them the best interview, and they send me an email and said, "This is one of the best interviews." Where someone says, "I've never been asked that before. I wish they would ask me that more often." And just welling up of pride and whatever go up and say, this is what it's for. This is what it's that's why I'm doing this. Or one
Yeah.
guy would say, that was a stupid question. How can you ask a question like that? Definitely gonna be edit that part.
Oh, I'd keep that. That'd be the clip. Yeah,
Really?
you got to do. Yeah, you got to do. I mean, you could take examples from other people, but I don't think you want to be the Dan Rather. I think you want to be the Christopher Robert.
Yeah.
You know, you want to do that. So find your own thing. Find what you can sustain and do on the level you want to on your own. Maybe you take a picture of your cat, the headshot of your cat, and you do that for your scheduling email. And you say, you know, Mr. Biggles is trying to schedule you for, you know, on stage podcast. Let us know if you're still going to show up. And then you can use the royal we, you know, because it's me and Mr. Biggles. And you go with it like that because then that's fun for you. If it stops being fun for you, nobody's going to watch it. I've had a few podcasts where I was talking to people and I was like, man, I'm bored. So I know other people are going to be bored and they just don't go. I just don't put those up. And then I've had some that I'm talking to before we're recording and the connection is so bad that I'm just like, you got to get a better camera and better sound and get a hard line connection because we can't have a conversation like this. I want to talk to you. And when you get that stuff, please let me know and we'll reschedule
Yeah.
because I don't want to talk to you right now because of it. So nobody else is going to listen to it. So we're just going to spin our wheels here. And I don't mind spinning my wheels sometimes, but not with this, not right now.
Yeah, you're right. And about quality, and I had one guy reach out to me 6 times. The first time I couldn't hear him. The second time it wasn't going through. The third, like it was all just sound and everything. And then he writes me and says, I don't think I'm supposed to be on your podcast. This is going to happen. And all he was going to do was explain something about the older musicians from the 60s and 70s. And he's going, I want to take Bob Dylan, for instance. Then he's going to give a whole seminar on Bob Dylan because he wrote a book about Bob Dylan, and he was like an author, but he was associated with music, and it just didn't work. Other times, it's like the conversation where I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Because I'm thinking that the audience would love to hear about the time you fell and tripped and landed on a mattress on a flatbed truck driven by the lead singer of such and such band. That's an interesting story. I've heard
Mm.
everything, but what I'm looking for is engagement. I'm looking for people that I love this episode. You go to Joe Rogan podcast, Rich Roll, you go to Diary of CEO, you go all them. You get people writing in saying, "Oh, I love this episode. I love this. I love that. I love this." And you do so much hype. I do so much promotion for their episode. I put it everywhere because I know some guy who works in radio, and he said this is what you do. That why do you think I have 1.5 million? So I do this, I do that, and then the episode releases. 2 weeks later, 26. 4 weeks later, 27 views. I'm like, oh, what am I gonna do? And then you go to episodes, which I told somebody, John Smith up the street, who's a baker, he plays a violin in a band, and he gets like 500 views in like a day, and I'm like, why? I don't understand this algorithm sometimes on YouTube, but stuff like that. So I don't want people to say, okay, we want to get such and such celebrity or musician on your podcast, but I noticed that you only have like very low views. You don't have 1.5 million subscribers. I noticed too, oh, okay, 1,500 for him, but why is this guy at 26 views after a year? I know this guy. He played in this band. You're not doing something right, blah, blah, blah. So I want to be that guy. I want people to, you promote an episode and within 2 weeks it's at 1,500 views. Yes, views are important and engagement is important, but it helps me talk to people. You know, Having the podcast helps me talk to people. Before the podcast during the pandemic, they're like, "Hi, Chris, is it going?" Now it's like, "Hey, how's it going? How's the podcast going? It's going great. Who do you have? Oh, wow, you would not believe who I have. Well, So sometimes I'm like, what am I doing this for? And other times I'm like, I can't wait for episode 300. I don't even know what the next 50s are. But yeah,
Yeah, it's the one bite at a time.
yeah.
It's when you're doing your post production, what program do you use? Like, do you use CapCut or something like that when you're putting in the clips?
No, there's a company called Enlight, and they have a video editing app called Video Leap, and I also use Photo Leap. So they have a whole bunch of 5, 6 apps under the name Leap, Video Leap, whatever. So Video Leap, I have used Video Leap for 3 years as my editor for videos. Just completely for the iPhone. I don't use laptop or anything. The iPhone's fast. I refuse to get an Apple laptop. Don't ask. And you can go as far as 6, 7K on this. So if I wanted to, I could do my in-person interview on the phone and I get better quality. And you're gonna learn, okay, YouTube. If you do something at 760p, it's gonna load to 760p. But even if because StreamYard allows you now 1080p and 4K, but you have to pay an extra. But I paid enough just to get the 1080p. But even if you post it on YouTube, it's still going to be showing us 780p or 760p. So if you want good quality, you have to go high, 4K. But the higher quality video quality you get, the video is going to be like 100 gig. So I noticed that a 49-minute video at 4K was 94 gigabytes. And yeah, so you have to edit that. And when you save it, you have to save it as 1080p, but it decreases the quality. So you try your best. I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot. And I've joined podcast guest, find a guest, be a guest on YouTube, on Facebook. I've joined all these podcast groups. I found some of them on LinkedIn, found some of them on these groups. Others have reached out, but yeah, people say, I'm a musician. I used to work with um, Rush. I used to be the lead singer of this band, this band, and I was the character in this big movie, Bob Buster movie. I do acting and all that. I loved for you to be on my podcast, and then you have them on, but other times they're like, "Mm, I don't want to be on the on stage. No, I want someone better than that guy, you know? I saw one of his episodes. I don't like that, you know? It hurts, but I'm not going to go, okay, that's it. No more. That one person out of 300. Nope, no, you know? I'm not going to do that.
Just tell them it's practice. It's a good
Yeah,
practice podcast.
yeah,
Everybody's learning.
yeah.
Well, then, music wise,
Hmm.
how much time do you spend writing music or playing music?
Well, playing music and actually singing cover songs, and I wish I could give you the lyrics I have for music over here, but I wrote songs back in the 80s with a friend of mine named Bill, and he played the guitar, and I had like four songs. One is like Genesis 1 to 7, a Christian song about one section of the Bible, and there was one about sort of like a love song, and then I wrote a song about war and the people who got killed in war. So I was young, I was like, what, 21. And then I got into music and I started getting into opera. I'm a tenor, baritone. Uh, but writing music, I have to take a songwriting course because I don't know how they do that. That's why I asked them, what's their song creation process? Where do they find inspiration? Um, some people have said everything from I just wake up in the morning and I write it down, or I'm taking a walk and I look, oh, it's a beautiful day. Oh, yeah, I got inspiration for a song, that bluebird, you know, and all that stuff. Others say, oh, I worked with this guy named whatever, and he's a record producer, he's a musician, and he helped me write the song because they know how to do that. The song can have a bridge, or just sound better without a bridge. How do you know that the violin belonged in there? I asked them everything. Said, "Wow, you're asking, you know, of course I want to know." And also, I want to be a good interviewer um, because it helps me if I were to put these four songs I wrote a few years ago. I want to release them, so I have to get like the the songwriter and all those to make it more modern, recent. And a lot of these songwriters tell me it's a really hard process, difficult process to get your song out there, especially what's happening with Spotify. They're not paying the musicians. One of my friends posted an album that got taken right down. Oh my goodness. The music industry is not kind these days. So, um, and I'll be taking up the bass guitar in January because I love that instrument. And yeah, so, but I don't
Well,
have any songs or anything to show you, but just cover songs.
with the time invested in music and writing lyrics or music, do you do that actively now? Are you still doing that, or you just have those four from the 80s?
Oh no, I'm still doing that. I write a lot of poetry. Usually poetry is sort of like I don't know if you ever heard of spoken word. It's sort of like
Mhm.
rap, but it's like spoken. Wordsmith is one guy who does a lot of spoken word. It's not like rap, sort of, but and rap is difficult. Um, there's a song by Kumo D called "I Gotta Work," and that's one cover song I tried to release, but it's just so difficult to do. And I'm like honored Kumo D how you were able to do that. Usher, all these other rappers, how do you do that? How do you memorize? It's hard for me to memorize lyrics. So, but I like to go in there and say, why is that there? What do you mean I gotta work? What is like if you look at the lyrics of Kumo D's I gotta work, you're like, where did he get these from? How did he make it work? How did he make this last word rhyme with this word? It's really difficult, but I do write a lot of poetry. I do write some lyrics sometimes, but I haven't really gotten into music. I just do a lot of cover songs and I set everything up like I am here. And I have like oh, the microphone is oh, it's on my cover. A professional microphone set right here, and I try to look as professional as I can, you know, singing like this, you know, and do everything I can to get my voice out there. And then I just I let the world know.
Why do you think you're drawn to do cover songs?
Uh, because you want to practice your vocal range. For instance, like I'm a tenor, I'm also both settle and mid range. And there are some songs that they say if you're a mid-range or baritone or falsetto, like I do a lot of Bee Gees songs, but I heard some pretty good cover versions of Bee Gees songs which were not done with falsetto. One of them is Feist, and Leslie Feist, and she did a song version of um, Love You Inside Out, which is more like a vibe to it. Some people do good cover songs, others do terrible. Some do cover songs that are better than the original. And if you're lucky, like I did a cover song of Bohemian Rhapsody, and people wrote in saying, "I don't believe this. You know, you probably would have Freddie Mercury uh, going like this. Good job." I'm like, "I'm no Freddie Mercury. It just happened that my voice was right at that point, and then my voice is right. Oh, I can sing that song now, so I better start singing it because who knows if I'm going to have the voice for it later." Um, I may be able to sing a Bee Gees song today, but if I don't sing it today, it'll be a long time before my voice is up to falsetto. So I love cover songs because I just love the vibe, and everyone does cover songs. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I think Freddie Mercury was saying towards the end of his time on Earth, where he said he wanted to just sing, he didn't want to write. So that's interesting. I was just trying to figure out the mindset behind performing a song, because it's fun to sing songs that you know, and then writing, like how you find that different. Do you see poetry, lyrics, and just writing regular things differently? How do you engage with each of those?
Well, there's an actual app called Songnify, which is was created by a company called Smooth, that was created by Jeff Smith, who's the CEO, and basically you could literally turn any piece of poetry into a rap, into a pop song, and it's amazing the sort of technology that goes into that. And I find writing poetry from the heart. I try to write it sonnet, not sonically, sonnet like Shakespeare's sonnet. Like I try to write it like a sonnet. Um, and yeah, if I ever do write a song, it helps me lyrically. But and before we say that, just talk about Bohemian Rhapsody. So down here we have the Metalworks recording studio where Prince had recorded Musicology, Nelly Furtado, and all these other famous. I think Taylor Swift was there too. It's only like 20 minutes from here. And every tour you get, you go into the recording studio, and Brian May and others from Queen have allowed them to use the original copy of Bohemian Rhapsody, and you get to hear Freddie Mercury isolated, you get to hear Brian May's isolated, you get to hear certain instruments isolated. It's just amazing just standing there thinking how they went through all that and they put it all together. So that's a complicated process right there.
Yeah, on YouTube, they have some videos I've been looking at recently where it isolates the singer alone. And one of them is Gautier's Somebody I Used to Know. And it has Kimbra singing on it too. And you can find, that's all you have to type into YouTube and you'll find it. And it has them doing it live. And then it also has that same live performance where it's vocals only isolated. And that's pretty amazing. Like when you hear, I think I saw a clip of Steven Tyler on whatever singing show he's on, like The Voice or whatever it is, where he gave the person he was talking to an example of singing a bar and he sang it, and you're like, oh, okay, there is a skill there, there's a difference. So it's cool to see the people with the talent doing those things, but it's interesting to listen to not only the tone of the words, the sound of them, but what they mean and how they go together lyrically. I think that's the
Yeah,
difference for me between poetry and lyrics is, and then just writing, like writing a book. I would say it's, you're getting up, you're saying something. There's a message. There's a message in everything, but you're saying something. And then for me, for poetry, it's listening. It's more of listening to whatever it is, wherever poetry comes from, because it does feel different to me than writing a book. And then if you're going in to write a song, I think that's different than poetry. It feels different to me because you're also trying to match it up with instruments and other sounds. And the bandwidth is more to it than just your own words.
Do you think it's possible to take like a paragraph or two from a book and turn those into lyrics and put music to it?
I mean, you could sing anything. I'm reminded of like the Saturday Night Live clips from the 90s with Adam Sandler and
Yeah.
I think it was Kiefer Sutherland as Slash and Adam Sandler or somebody was doing Axel and they sang the ABCs and Little Bo Peep. I think Sebastian Bach was there from Skid Row. So you can sing, you can put anything to music, but so I guess technically you're making a song out of it. But if you're writing a song, I think you're thinking differently than writing a paragraph.
That's true. And then you have to figure out what's the first line of the song and should this have a bridge or not? Like a lot of songs have bridge, but I've heard a lot of songs that don't have a bridge. And it's a nice song, but I mean, for instance, uh, Under the Bridge by is that Red
Red
Hot
Hot
Chili
Chili
Peppers?
Peppers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my favorite band. So they have some really good music, and it's sort of like has a vibey to it. But how did they start that first line? How did they like? It must have been like collaborative effort. But when you listen to it, it's like, oh, this is a great song, but what goes into it? I mean, if I ever get a chance to, which I probably never speak to, I can't remember her name. Let's take Amy Lee from Evanescence, for instance. Amy Lee, how did you do that song, Bring Me to Life? And you had Dave Hodge on that part. Why was Dave Hodge the one that worked with you? Why did you do the video where you're trying to save him from falling off the building? Um, it's a great song otherwise. And then you got that part with, stuff like that. I'm awake. Awake with what? So tell me, what was the process that went into that? Maybe one day, but I haven't. I have Amy Lee on my podcast. That'd be awesome. But yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that that app that I had called Songify, you were able to read anything and turn it into a song. So I took that part of Forrest Gump where he's on like the bench who said life is like a box of chocolate, or the shoes part. I may turn that into a song. So anything can be turned into a song, but to bring it's a song, take the lyrics, like it's a big process. Like it's really difficult. I think the guy in the recording studio, Metalworks, told me, I said, how long does it take to write a song? He said, sometimes one song will take 6 months, others will probably take a week. And how about a full album? He said it might take a year and a half to create an album. I mean, like, wow, that's a lot of work that goes into just one song. 6 months? Some people, I talked to one guy who said that took him 20 years to finish a song. Like, there you go.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. It could take a long time. There's a podcast and I think a show on Netflix called Song Exploder with Hiru. I can't pronounce his last name, but I really like that because you can hear the artists specifically going through line for line, note for note of a song, explaining their thought process behind it. And it is more involved than you would first think. But when you wrote your 4 songs, when you write your poetry now, how does the idea occur to you? Where do you think those ideas come from?
Could I get my lyrics here? It's
We
just
just
over.
talk about we can just talk about the process of it. One thing I found with poets is because I would call myself a poet as well. When a poet starts reading their poetry, you can't get them to shut up. So it's kind of like having a conversation about driving a race car, and watching someone drive a race car. It's 3 different things. So right now we're talking about driving a race car. So when you're writing poetry, how do you come up with those ideas? Do you write them down just throughout your day, like a line occurs to you, a couple words occur to you, and then you come back later and put them together? Do you sit down and say, right now I'm going to write a poem and the topic is going to be this thing? Or do you think it's poetry is you writing it through whatever your experience of life is? Or do you think it's something else that's communicating through you, almost like an antenna or whatever, that's talking and you're listening to it and recording it?
Well, you get an idea of what, like reading poetry, like Robert Burns or Shakespearean sonnets, and you're thinking, okay, this is interesting. So one would be tiger, tiger, burning bright in the evanescence of the night. So you got to figure out, you got light, night. That's an actual. Um, that's an actual. I don't know if you ever heard of that poem. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the essence of the night. It's a well-known poem. So it depends whether you're doing haiku or you're doing rhyming poetry, or you're just not rhyming at all, which is called a sonnet. Um, I mean, there's no rhyming for orange. I mean, you can use the word grange, you can use the word derange, but how does that fit in orange? So you eliminate that word orange. You talk about, maybe I take a fruit and I enjoyed it, but I'd suggest you don't and avoid it, you know? So, and then when you got the first two lines, and then you have to think of a third line, but it has to tie in with the first. So poetry is difficult, but after a while you understand, okay, this is a sonnet, this is haiku, and it is based on experience. I can write a poem about my cat, Hannah. What am I going to use? Banana. I'm going to use my Nana. So I just say my cat, who's black, and this and that. You know, you just change words if it doesn't make sense. People going to read it and say, "What? You're using Hannah and banana to get?" No, don't do that. You know, so you got to change it. It's really difficult sometimes.
I do find there are different types of poetries for sure. We could write a whole list of the different types. Free verse is more of my deal, although I don't mind a sing-songy rhyming poem. But this is just from me. I'm not a famous poet. I think that rhyming poem has its time and it's fun. I think it's more kid stuff than Emily Dickinson.
Oh yeah,
So
nothing compares.
I want a poem that makes me think and I listen to figure out what the message is. But I also can enjoy Dr. Seuss.
Mm.
That's fine too. And I think it's all in the type of what you feel connected with. If I was going to write a rhyming poem, I would think that's me pushing the pen more than anything else. And if I was going to write a poem that maybe has some emotion twisted in there somewhere, and maybe it's from life that, words from my experience that's manifest through my life, but it's also feels like it's coming from some other place.
Mm-hmm.
And then however I'm trying to hear it throughout the day, like whether it's in words somebody else says and it's just two or three words and you go, well, that they good together, what's that make me think about? Or if I see something or think about something, it's how would I describe that? What's that feeling? That with poetry, for me, it's more about what am I hearing, and then I get to the feeling, versus writing a book is about what the message is and what I'm feeling. But
Yeah, yeah.
when you're writing, have you ever written anything, whether it's article, poetry, lyrics, whatever, that you've gotten into that zone with, where you're like, wow, that's really good. Where did that come from? Have you had that occurrence?
Well, these four songs that I wrote, with Bill. So he came up with a lot of lyrics. Some one of the songs uh, called All Creation, Great and Small. That's from Genesis 1. In the beginning, God. So it was sort of like this, but the Bible I would think is also poetry. And I do get into the zone, but just to say, okay, I'm going to write a poem for you right now. We'll be here for hours. But if I'm talking to someone, I said, yeah, we're talking about poetry, and I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, how does this sound? You know, or I lost my dad 22 years ago, and my mom 32 years ago. I could write a poem about my dad, lost my dad and my mom, but why am I doing it now? They've already been gone almost like 30 some odd years. Why not when it's fresh? Like I do a lot of acting, so when on my mother's 25th death anniversary, it suddenly came upon me, and I started crying. So I said, "Oh, this is a great chance to do this part where the character is crying because he lost his." So I did it right there, and I was literally crying. But I can't just suddenly, you know. But basically, poems should be done by experience. But for me to write a poem about the death of my dad and my mom, I'd have to be feeling it. Like I wouldn't be like eating pizza and writing it, or I wouldn't
Hmm.
be out on a date. I'd be like walking around and say, what a beautiful day it is. And when my father passed, blah 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 blah, and then I just go home and I write it. You know, I don't know if you know musicians where they have notebooks and you see them and they're just writing stuff down. Those are usually they're writing out lyrics for stuff. I said, what are you doing? I'm writing out lyrics for my stuff. Did I take a look at it? I said, no, I think it should be this or that way. But if they're in the zone, how dare you say that he's not writing it down properly? Just say, oh, that's great. Yeah, I suffered a loss recently. Well, okay, go do it. But parodies, parodies is another song, Weird Al Yankovic. Like he'll
Hmm.
take the actual song, like a surgeon, and he'll just write around
Cutting
it.
for the very first time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Classic.
So, I mean, if someone said, "Can you write a poem on such and such?" Okay, how long do you need? Well, give me a month, and I'll be able to write it. So it's not like I have to be in the zone. I have to be sitting there thinking, "Wait a minute," and then you say something in conversation. Hey, I'm a poet. Didn't really know it,
Mm.
because you said something that rhymed. Said, "Did you bring the money for the restaurant?" And we're gonna buy the hamburger and whatever, and you mentioned fries. But what about the lies that you don't? Hey, fries and
Mm.
lies, they work out,
Mm.
you
That's
know?
getting into some beat poetry there.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, and I get a lot of my thought processes from actors and musicians and those who do both. And I learned a lot. So, well, I never thought of that before. So you got those lyrics on the church window that someone had written on markers. So that's interesting. So graffiti. So that's why you call it graffiti song. And then they give you the reason. And so what's this line mean? That has nothing to do with it. The. So it's kind of interesting how they do it. And then so how long did it take you? Oh, I wrote this song like 15 years ago. I'm just releasing it now. Oh, wow. Or I don't know if this is true, but I heard that that Led Zeppelin wrote their song "Stairway to Heaven" in 15 minutes. And I heard rumors that Satan had taken over Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, and they wrote it in 15 minutes. But I know people who said that they wrote that hit song in 20 minutes. I heard people say they just suddenly wrote their hit song in 5 minutes because it just happened to come out of them, you know?
Yeah, I think it's something that you got to connect with. And the more often you connect with it, the easier it becomes. Like if I was just from talking to you right now and thinking, writing a poem about your mom and dad, and how would you start that? What's the first word? And then just looking at the picture of the tree behind you, and then past that tree is the corner. So I would say, in the corner past the tree, 3 lines connect. And then I'd go, okay, well, what does that make me think? 3 lines? Well, we're talking about 3 lives. So maybe I change 3 lines to 3 lives, or I have it repeat later in the poem, 1 time lines, 1 time lives. And then if it's past the tree, what am I really saying? Is it past the tree, or can I change that to past the green? Am I looking at the color of the tree? Am I looking at the lights of the tree? How else am I going to adjust that poem? And you can connect with whatever that creative force is, and just take what you're looking at and what you're feeling and then go from that. I think that's how, when you're talking about where did that first line come from, that's where it is. The first line could occur to you looking at something, hearing someone say something, a memory, reading something. It could come out of the blue while you're in the line at the grocery store. And the
Yeah,
only difference is you write it down, because otherwise, if you go, I'll remember that, you're not going to remember that, later you're watching Laverne and Shirley and you've forgotten all about it. So that's why you put the notes in your phone, you take a little notebook with you, and then you have to do it right when that idea strikes, is write that down. And then
well,
you can add that together with other things later.
yeah, I know every Christmas, I would go to my brother's place about an hour from here every Christmas, and then sometime we go to my sister's place up the street here. Um, but they always have this empty chair and empty chairs for my parents. So like they should be there. One year they put 2 photographs of my father and mother on the table, and I thought it kind of creepy. So okay, but
Mm.
people have their own way of dealing with grief. So that song "Empty Chairs and Empty Tables" from Les Miserables,
The
you
miserables. Yes.
know, but "Empty Chairs, Empty Tables," that song always comes to my mind. So other people's songs can make me remember that. But if I wanted to write a song, I'd say instead of the tree past the corner, if you notice the tree changes color once in a while, I would
Mm-hmm.
say something like, um, or that one, "This Christmas I gave you my heart." I'd be something, "Christmas time is here." No, not "Christmas time is here" again. That's the song. "Christmas is the time that I miss. I sit in the corner and looking up at the angel on the tree." Um, stuff like that. And then you just write out your thoughts, and then you go through it and try to think, okay, should I change it? And you just know how songwriting and poetry is very difficult. And I find that there's most time spent doing lyrics than there are poetry, because poetry, there's no music to it. It's like silent music. It's from the heart, the beat of the heart, right? But music lyrics, you have to, does this belong with a guitar? Should we put a violin in there? How about an oboe? And that's difficult, because now, are you, what's your songwriting process? Do you come up with the melody first and then the lyrics, or do you write the lyrics and then the melody? With poetry, you're writing it out, boom, done, and then you don't have to worry about music. It's how are you feeling? Oh, and then the day of your whoever lost loved one, on the day that they've been gone so many years before, like let's say someone passed away December 16th, 2008. So now it's the 17th, 16th anniversary. So today it's like you really, oh, I really miss him. This is the day. This is the day that I lost such and such. And then it's easier to write out a poem. I'm gonna write how I was feeling on the 18th anniversary of whatever. It's just sometimes it's sporadic. Other times you're like you have the paper and you just and you put the pen down and you're staring at an empty sheet. And 3 months goes by, and then you finally say, "Okay, I think I have a line," and you write it down. So it takes you what, 3 months to come up with, and you're like, "What is this all for? Why did it take me so long?" People read it. Wow, how long did it take you to write? This is great. Does it take you a day to write? No, it took 6 months. 6 months? Why? Well, you know,
Yeah.
it's
When I write a note down, I put the date and the time.
yeah.
And then eventually, if I have a longer poem or a song, or I use it in a book, like a quote from a person, I don't have the date with it. But if I'm doing poetry or music, then in the upper right, I have all the dates I worked on it and at all the times. And then you can start to see a pattern of engaging with that creativity. At least this is what I see. Like a late night voice is different than the afternoon voice. And I can, if I'm topically writing about something, I can tell it's coming from some other input of creativity. So that's interesting just to find out, like a behind the scenes of your own writing. But I like your idea of you just start looking at something and you write it down and then you chip it away. So it's kind of like you're sculpting because you
Yeah.
put all the words there. You have this paragraphs of words and then you start pulling them away and substituting or doing whatever. Don't worry about the tune or the lyricism of it to start with. You get to that later. But just from your talking, I would say the name of the poem is The Beat of the Heart. And I would start with violin sound, anniversaries, days gone. And then I'd go from there on the poem. And then, but maybe that's the free verse spirit in me is if it's stranger and more difficult to understand, I like that better because it's different. It can have a different meaning to different people. And that's pretty great. That's the art alive, I think. And
Yeah.
that's exciting about it. Now, when you're telling a story, it's more concrete. You can have allegory and things like that, but it's pretty defined. People will get frustrated if they're reading a story that is elusive, but a poem shorter and could mean something to them, strike a memory with them because they're interacting with creativity and you interacted with the creativity when you made it. It's they're going to recognize it. It might not be the same perspective that you have, but it's still there. That's the great part of it.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Shakespeare's sonnets and how he wrote all this, and thinking what was he going through when he wrote that Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright. I think he wrote that. It was Robert Burns, and how long it took him to write those plays because that's Old English. So if you were to write a Shakespeare play now, what do? You just write it in Old English, put it through an AI or something, or you write a play in AI and then you put it through AI to make, AI can do stuff like that. But if you wanted to, AI could write a poem for you and pass it off as your own. So you don't really know, but uh, or I might write a whole poem and put it through an AI to correct it, or say, can you change this line to say whatever? And he's like, yeah, I never thought of that. But if you want to talk about creativity, because AI doesn't really give you creativity, you'd have to sit down there in perspiration, and sweat, blood, and tears, and just write something, and then you look, I got a poem, or I got a book, I'm writing a book. Yeah, you got AI wrote that, right? No, no, I wrote it on my own. It took me, yeah, yeah. Sure, yeah. So this, how much of yourself would you put in it? Like for instance, I don't know if you're familiar with Imagine Dragons. Dan Reynolds wrote a song called Wrecked, which is
Mm-hmm.
about his brother's wife, Alicia, and she died of cancer, so he was close to her. And he wrote about her death, but also he mentions about some of the things that she taught him and some of the quotes that she gave him to continue on in his life. And one of my questions would be, so if what do you think of love songs? So if you're dating Deborah and you write a song about Deborah and now you're not with her anymore, you're with Wendy and you're married to her, does the song that you wrote for Deborah, does that still mean something to you? Or do you put Wendy's name in there now? Stuff like that. I said, well, Elton John, that song Funeral for a Friend, uh, when Princess Diana died, he put Diana's name in there, not Marilyn Monroe's name. Goodbye, Barbara Jean. It's a goodbye, Prince, Princess, and it's his song. You can do whatever he wants, but
Feels a little cheap.
it is. It's like,
Yeah. Write a
yeah,
new song.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the song Tiny Dancer by Elton John when he did that duet with Britney Spears. And that's a whole new podcast about talking about certain duets that you should not have. When Britney Spears and Elton John did that song Hold Me Close, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Elton, you
Yeah.
don't need the money. You're like, come on. Britney Spears, you may need the money for your children, but you're 46 now, your children are like 20, you know. But we don't, Anyway, but yeah. So for me to sit, like if I lost a friend today, I couldn't just say, "Oh, I lost John today." Oh, and I start writing. It doesn't work like that. You really have to like, how do you feel? How do you feel about it? Like if I was married for 20, 25 years and I lost my wife, how close we were, like, I'd be crying and I'd be like little baby, whatever, and I'd go into this dark place. I'd write about the dark place I've been since my wife passed away and some of the things we did and blah blah, but it would always have like turn from sadness to happiness to I'll try to move on. You just never really move on, but I'll try my best. She will always be in my heart, whatever. And then if that poem turns out, you might actually put music to it and you come out and produce a song. So basically, for someone else's wife that passed away, like my friend Neil, his wife passed away, I can't really write a song about it because it doesn't make. Maybe my sister passed, my brother passed, maybe, but sometimes it's sort of like, what do I write about today? What do I write about? Hmm. I took a poetry, no, creative writing course, and that was difficult. I used to write when I was a kid. I used to write short stories, but I wrote a Twilight Zone episode, but I took several Twilight Zone episodes and put them all together in one episode, and I created this episode, whatever. Um, but it's difficult to write stories, difficult to write poetry. You just have to be in the moment, like you said. You have to be there. You can't just say, "Hey, Tier, I'll write you a poem about your podcast." I can't do that.
Well, as Andre 3000 said from Outcast, some time must be invested for this to be manifested.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. See, I love unsound quotes too. Sometimes movie quotes are good too. But yeah, so basically, if I was a songwriter, I wouldn't do it on my own. I just specifically, well, maybe these four I wrote 25, 30 years ago. I'd rewrite them because a lot of them are immature. There's a 21-year-old who is interested in a girl that he saw on the bench in the park and wants her so badly. And I'm like, uh, you know, so I would change it to I saw this girl on the bench and I'd give her a name and I'd make up a whole scenario and said, yeah. And then I asked her out and we went out. Nobody knows. Nobody would know that except Bill, but I don't even know what Bill is. I haven't seen him in 40 years, um, but but I make it totally mine. And is it awful for me to say I take his name off it because eventually you rewrite the song, it's like 98% of your own idea because you eliminate all that immature type stuff when you were 21. Um, yeah, so people have done that. People have think, oh, I just wrote a song, I released it on Spotify. When did you write the song? 32 years ago. Why are you just releasing it now? Time is right. What do you mean right? Like what happened in your life that's time right? You know? So it's interesting who I have on my I just love it. I love doing it. Uh, so that just to learn how people do things. Like
What's the best way for people to find your podcast and see what you're doing?
yes, so it's on stage music podcast on YouTube, and in January we're going to be stretching out to other platforms. I haven't done that yet, and I should be doing it probably on Spotify and using Buzzsprout, whatever. But it's on YouTube for the moment. It's called On Stage Music Podcast. You can find me on also X, of course, on Instagram. Um, yeah, you should. And if you go to actually my YouTube channel, all my platforms are there. You can find that.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, just for now, it's on YouTube.
I'll put those in the show notes so people can find them if they would like.
Sounds great.
Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't, or any thoughts you have in closing?
Well, I know that you had certain questions that you wanted to ask, usually the artists or the people on your podcast. Have you said all those questions already? There were
Yeah,
three, I think.
that's just the general guidelines, if you will, the mustard and the mayonnaise, which is a fun thing to say when you're somebody's driving, is keep it between the mustard and the mayonnaise. But yeah, yeah, it's just the guide for the conversation. But I think we did well.
Um, Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. To tell you the truth, I'll be honest with you, TR. This is my second podcast I've been on. I know others who have podcasts have been on more than 10, 15, 20. And one artist I like so much, I got her to go on other podcasts. And I'm like, why don't I just become a PR or something? But you get an artist, musician, or an actor that just kind of like you kind of like to, what do you call it? You're in sync sort of. And you're like, oh, okay. And I want to treat everyone the same. But yeah, this is the second podcast I've been on, I'd like to be on more, but I spend more time being on the other side of the camera as a host than I have, and I've never been a co-host. This is the second time I've been a guest, but I'm doing more podcasts being the host that I'm like conflict. I like to be on your podcast, but I have an interview. Oh, no, that's my party or whatever. So, and I know that we tried to schedule 3 times with it.
Yeah, I think it's about that many.
So I said, let's do it closer to Christmas. I wrote that in stone. So here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you've done 300 some podcasts, that you've been on at least 300 and some podcasts. It is different being a guest. I agree. It's less work, and that's interesting to see that side of it. And you know the other side of it already. So yeah,
Yeah,
just make the time for the things you want to do.
and one podcast I've been on, she said, "Here's a little clip from it," and I'm like, "My voice is lower." She put my voice lower. It's like I sounded like this. I'm like, "Why did she do that to my voice?" It was kind of weird. So do you have more than the same guest on more than once, or just once and that's it? Do they ever
I
come
think I've
back?
had two people on twice so far, but again, I've only done 129 episodes, so
Wow.
that's the
And you started a year ago, and you're already 129. Wow.
yeah. Well, it takes that time to where when you initially start to where I was trying to find what was the maximum theoretical podcast I could do and still live life, and then what's that? Then that makes backing off a little easier because you're like, well, I know I can do this many a week, but if I only do this many a week, then that might be easier, and I can have time for writing and doing other things. So I like talking about writing and creativity, but you also have to make sure you have time to do it yourself. It's kind of like if you are a fitness coach or a fitness trainer and you never work out, it's not going to work. You got to schedule time for you to do your own stuff too.
So what
So
about you? Have you been on any podcasts yourself?
I've been on one.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? You don't have time to do that.
I just didn't have, well, I was scheduled for a few and then they got canceled. So
Mm,
it's, it's different. It's the same conversation, but for me, the only difference was I don't have to worry about all the production end of it. I don't really prepare so much as I would do for a podcast I'm doing. And you don't want to over prepare because,
yeah.
like, I used to do a lot of research, like maybe an hour or more on the person I was going to talk with. And then I would have an imaginary conversation with them about what I want to know from them, what I'd talk to them about. And then I was like, man, that's too much preparation because it takes away the authenticity of it because you've already done it. So it's like Groundhog Day when he's, however many days into the snowball fight and all that stuff. And you're like, oh, okay, you just phoning it in at this point, or it's not new. It's not as exciting. And when you're doing a podcast that maybe tens of people watch, then if it's not exciting for you, you're not going to keep doing it. So you got to find, like, what are you getting out of it? And what I'm getting out of it is I'm talking to people about creativity. That's great. I would do that anyway, even if I wasn't doing a podcast. So let's do this and then see what happens. Maybe 10 years from now, it's still going. Maybe it's not. I don't know. It's just one episode at a time.
So what's your motivation for the podcast? How did you start it? Why did you start
Talk to people about creativity. Originally, it started with the idea of talking to people about doing adult content creation, so it's more of a OnlyFans type into it. And then I discovered that people that do OnlyFans,
Mm.
people that do OnlyFans don't just do the adult side of it. There's plenty of comedians and cooking shows and other stuff that isn't adult,
Mm.
but there's the big part is adult, I think. So people that do that, I don't think want to talk about doing it. They want to do it and make money off of it. And I was more interested in the how do I feel about it? That's where those three questions came up of what did you, was this what you thought it was going to be? How do you feel about it now? All that. How'd you get started with it? So then I was like, man, I write and I've lately back then started doing poetry. So I was like, I'd rather talk about
Mm.
creativity. So broaden that topic a little more, not just creativity about content creation for the adult world, but creativity in general. So that's how I got to this. And I think people are more likely to talk about creativity, songwriting, poetry, regular writing, sculpture, painting, all that stuff than they are about why
Mm.
they got started in adult content creation and what they feel about it now. Because my
Mm.
experience with it was you do lose a little bit of your soul. Not that there's, I guess, a problem. Maybe in the larger picture, losing a piece of your soul is a problem. But as far as judgment goes, no judgment. It's just my experience with it. So,
Wow.
conversations about creativity.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Are you a musician yourself? Okay.
I I play enough for me, but I am not a professional musician. Like I'm not going to read sheet music and talk to you about it, but I could play a couple things on a piano, some guitar stuff, have a good time, but not I'm not a rock star. Maybe one day it would have been fun years ago, but I'm not regretful about how life has turned out.
Why do you suppose there's a lot of podcasts out there? I mean, during the pandemic, people started podcasts. Some of them ended, some of them are still going on. Some celebrities I know are doing podcasts, like there's Really No Really, which has Jason Alexander from Seinfeld as one of the
Mm.
hosts on it. Um, and Lisa Loeb, who's a musician, you know her. She's
Mm-hmm.
also a podcaster. So why do you suppose people go from music to acting to podcasting? Like, what do you think is making people go to podcasting? To meet people? Is it creativity, what you said? What do you think?
I think it's talking to people. Like during the lockdown, I'm sure a lot of people felt isolated.
Yeah.
So it was a way to have a conversation with people. So I think that's my biggest drive of it too, is just the personal connection on, and I think it helps to have a topic. So if you're looking for a podcast, you'd say, I want to see a podcast about art, or I want to see a podcast about cars or
Yeah.
music or whatever. Then it's easier to find. But a general podcast is also fun. Like I would say Joe Rogan's is a general podcast about whatever Joe Rogan wants to talk about, which is very interesting, it turns out. So
Huh. Well,
I
what's
think it's good.
interesting, did you ever have people that you knew on the podcast? Was it
Yep.
just
That's how the first 10 or 15 people were people that I knew. And then from there, I got on to that matchmaker.fm,
hmm
not matchmaker.com. That's a different site, but matchmaker.fm. And that puts people that have podcasts with people that are looking to be on podcasts. So I, I like that. I'm thankful for that one. And I pay to be on that. So
Yeah.
you can also do the free version of it too, but I like that one. And that was the second biggest, well, I think it's tied to that first biggest stress of podcasting, which is consistency. Is if I have a podcast where I'm talking to someone else, how do I know I'm going to have somebody to talk to this week? So
Yeah.
I don't want to just talk to the same person over and over again. I mean, in real life, I'm going to talk to the same person over and over again about a bunch of different things and about a bunch of the same things, but it might not be interesting to anyone else.
Yeah. I had a coworker. I had supposed to have a friend of my brother's on, all musicians and artists, whatever. Um, I've had uh, 4 or 5 people from my high school on there. So I had a next door neighbor that when I was growing up on my street, my brother and I used to deliver newspapers to him and his dad. Um, his dad's like 98 and he's like in the 60s, and we're reminiscing. Yeah, I remember when you used to hand the paper to your dad, and he goes, "Yeah, I remember you lived up." So it was fun, but you can joke with people you know, but you can't do it with people that you just meet. That, yeah, I just want to, So
Yeah, it's a different kind of joke,
yeah,
but
yeah, but yeah. So I intend to reach episode 500, 600, 700. I want to go all the way. I want Sting on my podcast. I want to interview Christina Aguilera. I want Nicole Kidman. I want some of these big artists on there. Why? Maybe I want to prove that they're people and that people don't need to be like Gaga and Goo Goos over them. Well, Lady Gaga. Just normal people, you know? Uh, the people saying, "Oh, I love this person. Yeah, I saw their movie." Yeah, but they're just people. Like my sister and brother-in-law ran into Ariana Grande in a they live in LA. In a grocery store, and she's dressed like a housewife, going shopping. I said, "Hey, you're Ariana Grande." Yeah. She's not like dressed up, and people. These are people too. So yeah, I just love it. I just love doing it. But I'll tell you one thing: the Wi-Fi and everything. If it's raining or snow, whatever, or suddenly the internet goes out, then the alternative is use the service plan on your phone. Otherwise, you're like, yeah, the internet is crap, so we'll have to postpone. But I've had interviews with people with their side, like where you are, sort of like they're,
mm, hmm
you know, and bad quality. So I try my best to edit that part out. Like they disappear, and then 3 minutes later they're like, "Oh, sorry, I had to reboot my machine." They come back, disappear. So you have this whole episode where it's got places where they suddenly are kicked out, and you just edit it to the point where people who watch it don't even know that happened. That's how precise I can edit. I've gotten so good at
that's good if you like doing it. It sounds closer to the 700-pound lift than
that.
the 20-pound lift. So I don't
Most
know.
people don't
I
like
think
doing the editing. I know.
I've done editing on CapCut for like a video game where like video game play and then put music to it and you speed it up, slow it down, different perspectives. And that's fun. I wouldn't, I don't know if I'd want to do it for the podcast because then it would just be like a restriction on how quick I get the podcast out. Because like right now, after we're done, I download it from StreamYard,
Yep.
audio and the video. So audio only, and then the video with audio. I don't take them apart and put them back together. But I found that sometimes if you have a bad connection for some reason, Spotify or YouTube will kick the video, and then you'd have to put it into a program to separate the audio from the video so you could just publish the video. So I just download the video with audio and then the audio so I have it if I need it or if the other person wants it. And then I upload it within minutes of us being done to Spotify and put it in for whatever time it's going to publish. And then I upload it to YouTube and put it in for whatever time it's going to publish. And then it's out there. So if something happened to me, likely there would be 4 or 5 podcasts still going on for 4 or 5 weeks from now.
Hmm.
Like if an engine off an airplane landed on me when I'm walking my dog this afternoon, this podcast will still air on the second Wednesday of January,
Oh wow.
2025. So it's already, the clips won't get done, but I'll be clipped, but the podcast will still go on. So then it's one of those things where it's on there and you don't have to worry about it. It's there. So then you continue on with life.
So you don't like doing the upcoming. You like just posting it. Boom, it's done. You can watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I put the clips out after it's published. And then you figure, well, if a podcast has been published a year ago and somebody just finds it tomorrow, it's new to them.
Hmm.
So if they are interested in that person, that writer, that poet, that whatever, then maybe they come across it on a name search or whatever, and they, oh, here it is. And when you work with algorithms,
Yeah.
I've given up trying to figure out how to do it, but I have found lately that with StreamYard, they have a AI that does clips.
Hmm.
So
They do.
you can
They'll
run that
generate.
through.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it does it, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it'll give you 7, other
Hmm.
times it'll give you none.
Yeah.
So I mark in during the podcast at least 2 spots where I would do a clip if I was going through like I used to, and then I'd pick it out myself. But I find the AIs hit the algorithm more for some reason. The views on the AI selected clips are much more than the ones that I've collected. So you can put it on X, Instagram, YouTube, and you'll get 400 or 500 views off the AI generated one. So I think there's something where the computer is talking to itself, the way
Yeah.
the keywords they put in it or whatever,
I
and
know.
YouTube algorithm pick up on it.
Yeah, I noticed that one of mine is 25,000 views. I had one that's 4,500 views, and I had Father Ray, who was a singer. He was on Britain's Got Talent. Um, he's over 2,400 views.
Wow.
And I'm clicking myself and thinking, why is this one, who's the lead singer of this well-known band out there, why is he stuck at 73 views the last 3 months? And yet Father Ray or this other actor from the Ukraine or this Croatian guitarist is at 24,000. I'm trying to whack my head. What is it about them? Why? 24,000, 73. I don't get it. This guy's famous. She's, famous maybe in Ukraine, whatever, or Croatia, but I'm trying to figure out. So yeah, I also went to the YouTube channel on Daryl Eves. He wrote a book called The YouTube Formula, and he has people who tried YouTube Formula come in and said, "So you mean to tell me you had like 34 views on your episodes, and after reading YouTube Formula, yeah, and now I'm getting 1.5 million views, and I got 328,000 subscribers," and I'm like, you know, I guess it's a matter of luck. Like I'm not monetized yet, and I hope to be, but it's taken quite a long time. But I'm over 100,000 views. I'm over almost 2,500 subscribers, and maybe one or two videos I post the other day might rise in views. And I don't know if it's the algorithm or the people said, I can't wait till you post it because then I can share it on my platforms.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes I'm like lucky that why why is she at 1,500 views? I don't get it. It wasn't shared or anything. Or, this actor in this movie, like 23 views, and it's been 2 months. It's just stagnant. So I just I don't worry about it. I just love doing it still. I don't worry about views or subscribers. I don't worry about being monetized. I just love doing it. I used to hate podcasts, and when I got into podcasts, now I'm watching all these podcasts, Joe Rogan and Rich Roll and Diary of a CEO and just regular people and how they do it, the questions they asked, and I'm like, I'm loving it. And I said, okay, that's an interesting question. I asked that question before. Maybe I'll just ask it that way next time.
Hmm.
Or it may be going to say, can you tell us what your song creation? You might say, so I heard that songs usually are from experience. What experience did you have when you wrote the song? Da, 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 da. Oh, yes, that's right. So this happened. And you might not have known if you didn't ask. And then that becomes a clip or something. But let me ask you, TR. So I've seen podcasts where they have the clip or whatever at the beginning to show you some amazing sort of conversation, which is about 30
Hmm.
seconds. And then you get the beginning, and then they have to watch the whole podcast to find out where that part is in there. So what do you think of that type of thing? Because I did that for a while and it still wasn't
Yeah. I think if people want to do it, then go for it.
working.
I'm just more of I'll put the conversation out there. The clips will be on this, it's a YouTube channel that does clips for this podcast,
Yeah,
and then X and Instagram right now. Lately, all I've been
cool.
getting from YouTube is strikes. So I don't know
Strikes.
how much longer I'll be on YouTube, but Yeah, if you get people that YouTube doesn't like and you talk to them, then you're going to get strikes when you publish a link to anything that they have, whether
Really?
it violates, yeah, whether it violates YouTube's standards or not. Because you're
Well,
like,
the
oh,
difference between a claim and a strike is totally different.
I haven't
Claim
gotten any claims yet, just
a strike,
strikes.
you 3 strikes and you're gone.
Oh, okay, good. I'm almost out of YouTube then.
Wow, that's interesting. I've heard so, like the algorithm doesn't like the word fuck. They don't like all this stuff. And but I watch videos where they have all these stuff on it. I'm like, well, when was the video published? A year and a half ago. Maybe the algorithm is pretty slow,
Yeah,
slow to catch up. But it said you can't use those words. So some of them, like I had someone from the Ukraine, and she was talking about, Zelensky and Putin and all that and everything. I'm like, I can't have that. I'm gonna delete it. So every time she spoke, I silenced it so you just hear her just,
mm,
and then I posted it. And then I think she got rid of that. She was so upset she didn't want to talk to me. I said, "You can't. That's freedom of speech. You're silencing. People should have." This is a YouTube channel. This is a podcast based on musicians. That's something dealing with politics, which doesn't belong. Like if I start telling you about Trump, you won't allow that. I think.
I wouldn't mind. YouTube will. I mean, there's all manner of depravity on YouTube, but if you put a link in your podcast for a person that has an art website and some of those arts are nudes, then and they don't like them, if YouTube doesn't like them, then you get the strike.
Then you just remove the link from your show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the totalitarian footsteps harder on your face if you want to go with a 1984 visual.
Oh, I don't know. That's a lot of conspiracies out there. People are saying that the COVID was fake and all this stuff, or was flat Earth, or there was no moon landing on it. You really like? I mean, it's weird. I don't. The JFK conspiracy. I like that part. Like, who did?
I like that. I like it when people talk about conspiracies and they say, this isn't real, this isn't real, but this other one
Yeah,
obviously is real.
yeah. I know.
The driver shot JFK. Yes, the driver did. It's on tape. We can all see it.
It's funny when like crows, parrots, and some cockatiels have the ability to speak. So when people see a crow, crows are intelligent, but they also have managed to be able to speak. People will look at us, and if they didn't know that crows could speak, they'll say, "Oh, this is a guy. This is fake." But when you have a dog speaking, or you have these videos of the cats literally saying full sentences, you're like, "That's true. It sounds like meow," but they could be also saying, "I want it now." It's depending how you hear it, right? I know if you recall, they have this thing where they have like a phrase, and you can hear the phrase saying 5 different things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, depending what you hear. You're supposed to
Mhm.
hear fried eggs and green ham, or whatever, and that's what you will hear. Or you'll hear something else, and when you read that, that's what you'll hear. It's kind of amazing. So we hear a
Yeah.
whole bunch of stuff. But
That's just
yeah,
how us programs are written.
yeah,
But my dog can tell me that sandpaper is rough and that there's a roof on the house.
yeah. I heard that one too.
That's the
Or
old
about cats.
McDonald's commercial.
I saw actually a really good Tim Hortons. Oh, you're not in Canada, right? You're in the States.
Yeah, Florida.
Well,
Free
yeah,
state
we
of
have.
Florida.
Okay, so we have a coffee shop called Tim Hortons Coffee. They have a really good Tim Hortons commercial on. But I don't know why people are making multi-millions and billions of dollars and the company had to advertise. You know, why do you need that commercial? It's a new one, new Christmas one, but you don't need to because I've known people in the States. They say, "Oh yes, I love my Tim Hortons coffee because I was there in Canada, and I love their coffee." Okay, that's not for me. It's people in the States know about Tim Hortons. But someone from Germany might come here and see Tim Hortons, go in and have a coffee. I don't like it. It sucks. I prefer Starbucks because they're all over, right? I don't see a Starbucks commercial anywhere. Why is Tim Hortons? I see some Wendy's commercials, some McDonald's, but I hardly see these kind of commercials. But if you go on YouTube, you'll find the most funniest 70s commercials of like kids' toys, and you're like, oh my god. Now you're looking at it and saying, that's a creepy toy. But back when you're a kid, I want that toy. But you look at it, oh
Yeah.
my god, that's creepy, you know?
Stretch Armstrong. You got to have that one.
Yes, exactly, yeah. So it's kind of weird. It's just fun, TR. I really appreciate this.
Yeah. It's a good talk.
Hmm.
Again, I'll put your links on the show notes so they'll be there.
You want me to send it to
And
you?
if they're on, I have your YouTube one. So if you
Oh,
have your
that's
other
right.
links on YouTube, I'll just get them off of there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I appreciate your time, and
Thank you.
we'll wrap up here. We'll do
Sure.
some closing music, and then I'll talk to you on the other side of that.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Hello, McDonald's. Yeah, yeah. One ringy dingy. Yeah.